Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar session, Customizing CK-12 Adaptive Practice and Assignments. I'm Lindsay, one of the CK-12 team members, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar. Just a reminder that this webinar is a core session for the CK-12 Certified Educator Program. So there is an assignment for this session, which can be found in the CEP Flexbook. Please be sure to preview the questions to make sure you are all set to answer them, as you will need to work your way through the assignment in one sitting once you click the Start Quiz. Like our other sessions, we encourage you to use the chat window in Zoom to connect with others, making sure you select all panelists and attendees. While the Q&A window is for questions for the CK-12 team. This will help us track answers and make sure we get all of your questions answered. One last reminder about our session resource pages. They are available for you in our Flexbook, or you can access them at the tiny URLs we provide. The one for this session is tinyurl.com, CK-12 Custom AP 2019. You can save that, print that, download it, or just know that it's there in your Flexbook. All right, I'm going to kick it to Katie and let her get started.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone who joined us today for our session on customizing practice. In our Getting Started with Practice and Assignment session, we covered the basics of our adaptive practice system, along with CK-12 classes and reports. So if you missed that session, I highly encourage you to revisit that archive recording on our webinars page or join us next week for that next offering. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following: customizing CK-12 practice into quizzes. So both a little bit of difference between what that practice versus quizzes are and how to start customizing or creating your own quiz. We'll then talk about creating your own questions. So if you want to write your own questions and add them to a quiz on CK-12, we'll cover that, as well as how to incorporate formatted math text within there. And then finally, we'll talk about using those quizzes, whether you use them as inline questions, add them to Flexbooks 2.0, and then seeing reports when you've assigned them to your students. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand the difference between practice and quizzes, you can create your own custom quizzes and even questions, and you know how to use them and what reports would look like for practice and quizzes on CK-12.
We would like to launch a poll to find out a little bit about your knowledge of our practice tool and find out if any of you have been customizing practice. So we're going to launch a poll right now, and you should be seeing it on your screen. Just one question for today. We would like to know, what experience do you have with CK-12's adaptive practice and quizzes? So you're going to choose any of these, all of these that apply to you. I am new to CK-12's adaptive practice. I use CK-12's adaptive practice. I've customized CK-12's adaptive practice into quizzes. I've embedded quizzes or inline questions in CK-12 Flexbooks, or swapped out practice for a quiz in a Flexbook 2.0. That's one of our newer capabilities. So I'll be interested in seeing if we have anybody with us today who has done that one. But if you all will select the answers that apply, we're watching the answers come in live here. I'll tell you right now, Katie, we've got a lot of newbies, which is great. We will give you another 10 seconds or so to lock in your answer. If you've already answered the poll but you haven't introduced yourself in the chat window, now might be a good time for you to introduce yourself and tell everybody where you're from and what you teach. Again, just make sure in the chat window you're selecting all panelists and attendees. Okay, why don't we go ahead and end this poll and share the results. And maybe what I would have guessed, possibly, we've got a lot of people who are new to CK-12's adaptive practice, some experienced people who've used the adaptive practice, and maybe they attended the Getting Started session and they started using it then. A few people have customized adaptive practice into quizzes. And then, like I said, we have this new capability of embedding quizzes and inline questions in our Flexbooks 2.0. So we've got a couple people who've tried that. Thank you for participating in the poll. We'll close out of that. So let's move on to the difference between practice and quizzes. This is one of the most frequent questions we get when we're talking about either adaptive practice or quizzes is how do I differentiate between the two? So we've got a few slides here that are hopefully going to talk you through the differences. I think to frame it, it's easiest to talk about what they have in common. So this is true of both our adaptive practice and our quizzes. They both pull from CK-12's database of 150,000 questions. And those questions are primarily math, science, and spelling. Both can be what we call quick assigned from their modality pages or assigned through CK-12 classes or a learning management system. Reports include time spent, level of questions, answers chosen, etc. And students can access both practice and assigned quizzes through a browser on a phone, a tablet, or a laptop. There are hints available, but for quizzes, you can choose to turn them off if you would like. There's a scratchpad option for both, and you can choose the due date if you are assigning. Okay, so that's what they have in common. Katie's going to tell you about adaptive practice now.
So adaptive practice is really the goal of kind of having students practice and work their way through learning a concept. So it adjusts to meet students' skill level. That gives them easier or harder questions. If they're struggling, it offers them recommendations. That includes reads, videos, flicks, and more. If they're struggling, as I said. And then the goal of that is to get 10 correct. So that's a system requirement. That's what the goal is set for practice. If they get those 10 correct, they get 100%. If you assign this within a learning management system and you, let's say, set 20 points for that practice, then they would get the full 20 points or whatever the percentage would be that translates. It does save their work as they go. It is really a cumulative thing. They're aiming for that goal over the course of time, so they can pick up where they left off at any point in time. And hints are always available. And you'll see right on this practice page at the top that customize option. And so that's where you start the process to create a quiz. So if I clicked customize on this practice, I'd bump into my quiz workflow. And you'd see this create quiz option. And so there's a few things to note about quizzes. Now, you all are getting some great experience with quizzes as you work your way through ours, especially with some extra bonus new testing of question types. So note that the idea behind quizzes is really, this is a custom assignment for you to give your students. It is not adaptive. If you pick those questions for your students, our system is not going to override that by saying, hey, we think they should have actually gotten this question. You can pick the number of questions, or you can actually go in and pick the specific questions that you want. You can create your own questions from scratch. So we'll talk about that in this webinar. And then the percent is based on the total correct. So it's based on, let's say you have 10 questions, then it would be a goal of 10 correct to get 100. If you had 20 questions and you only got 10 correct, you would get to 50%. And then each attempt starts at the beginning. So because there are teachers that use this kind of as a quiz, it doesn't save their progress. Kids can't go in and try a question and then go look up the answer and then come back to it. They are starting from the beginning each time, and you can set the number of attempts so that maybe they only have one chance to do it or two chances to do it. We are looking into options in our system to have something kind of in between where you customize practice, but it's not quite as fixed as a quiz would be. But right now you have kind of two choices. And then the last thing that you can do there is you can set the time, or you can turn hints off, or you can shuffle the questions for everyone. So there are some settings there. If you assign this work, you would get that report. I'm going to talk to you about inline questions in a bit, and those don't generate a separate report. So just we'll talk about those differences in terms of how you're using the quiz as well. So the real question is, where do you start if you're looking to customize practice or create your own quiz? So if you want to create a new quiz, then you would go to your library. Under the left bar, you'd see create new, and you'd click on that and expand it and choose the quiz option. And from there, you'll get bumped into that quiz editor screen you just saw and be able to add existing CK-12 concepts and questions or create your own. Now, the other option is to create a quiz by customizing practice. You can do that from the practice browse option, or by going to a modality page through search or through some of our browse options as well. So you'll see the customize option kind of at the top of your browsing practice, or if you go to a practice page, it'll be on the left bar. So I think with that, yeah, so you'll see that kind of customize option on the left bar there. With that, I'm going to seal the screen over. I am going to share the CK-12 page. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So as we said, hopefully you can all see this screen. The first option is kind of browsing through practice. You can browse through practice by scrolling down on the home page and clicking on this practice icon right here, or clicking on explore and clicking on adaptive practice. And both of those will get you to our practice browse page. So let's say I wanted to pick something in earth science. So if I did that, I could go here. It looks like the scientific method I might have opened, but I haven't started answering questions on. But if I just clicked on that scientific method concept, right here you'll see the option to customize. You do need to do it from practice specifically and not any attached practice to like some other modality. And that's where you get the full option, including the customized piece. Alternatively, I could browse some particular concepts. So some of our math is set up where you could actually kind of, this math by subject would get you to pages that are concept pages, or I could simply search. So let me search for, let's say the topic, maybe the water cycle, and I got to the water, and let's see what we get. So we have water here. If I want the full water cycle, I could start that part, and you'll start seeing options. So here's an earth science concept. I could click directly on this concept page, or I could filter and just say, I just want the practice options for that. And so I'm going to open that practice page. And from there, I could choose to customize this as well. And that's where you'll see that customize option on the left. If you wanted to just create new questions directly, there is the option to kind of create them now, and they would be available later on. So that create new question option is available right below that customize. But I'm going to click customize, and I am apparently not signed in right now, so it's going to log me back in. So there we go. It must have kicked me out. So we'll try that one more time. We're going to click customize, ready to make your own quiz, and it kicked me into my quiz view. So from here, I'm going to call this a demo for July 10th and on water. So we're going to move that around. It looks like there are 51 questions that CK-12 has created on the water cycle for earth science. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those options down there, but our system kind of pre-selects about 20 questions for that quiz, just randomly out of different types. And if I start at the top, let's work our way through our options for this. So one, I could put a quiz on the water cycle on, let's say, maybe I'm going to add stuff on water in general or the CEP. So that might just be a quick description for yourself to remember what that is. I can set the number of attempts. So if you're really trying to do this as practice, or in the case of our program, we've set this as unlimited. You can go back and you can try those as many times as you want. If you were using a custom situation for a quiz or a test, you may choose to say, I'm going to give students 1 or 2 tries. Let's say 1 through 10 are basically at that point in time. If they're getting more than 10, just kind of set it at unlimited. I could put the time limit for the whole quiz. I could say you're going to have maybe 45 minutes to do this from start to finish if I was doing it as a test. So that is an option. It's set for the quiz as a whole, so it's not per student, so just keep that in mind. And then if I'm editing stuff, this is coming up in English. For the most part, you'd be sticking with that. We do have some projects going on with some other languages, but that is there. And then your 3 options are to show hints. So if I was doing it as a quiz, I might want to unselect that so that my students wouldn't see the hints. The show solution, they would have the option to view the solution after they answer each question. So it doesn't show up for time quizzes because that kind of messes with the timing piece. But if you did want them to answer a question and see there's the correct solution right away, that would be an option. And then if you wanted all the students to get the same questions but in a different order, you'd select shuffle questions. And that would just kind of pre-select the questions and randomly assign them to students so that question 1 for one person wouldn't be the same as question 1 for the student sitting next to them. So let's jump into the actual questions. So right here, there are 2 options to adjust this. So option 1, I can say, let's say I only want 10 questions or for the water cycle. I can choose that. When I adjust that and click back outside of it, I will get a pop-up that says, you're about to change the number of questions. It will reset any earlier changes. So if you have handpicked the questions, this new random set of 10 will pull a new random set of 10. So you want to make sure that you're only changing the number if you don't have other pre-selected choices that you want to keep. If I do that, That's one option. I can just do that. The system will pick 10 random questions from a variety of levels and types, and every student will get the same set of questions. The other option is to go in and edit this. And if I click this little pencil edit icon, I can go in and I can actually see which questions the system randomly chose. So it looks like the area over New York City normally contains. I can expand this. You get some multiple choice options, and you can see what that looks like. You'll notice it gives you the type of question and the difficulty level. All of these say author CK-12 because they're ones that we've created within our system. And I can choose to rearrange the order. So I could say I actually want this question to come up third. Now, if you had selected the shuffle option in the previous one, you no longer have the ability to rearrange because it's basically the system's warning you that your order in here doesn't matter for students. So we're not going to kind of have you select that when you've already selected a random order. But you can put all of your questions within here. And you'll see kind of if you want to choose other questions, you could go down and preview any of the other questions in the system for that particular topic. And then if you selected it, you could drag it where you wanted, or if you saved it, it would add it to the batch at the top that you have selected. The last option here, I could add my own question. So I'm going to go into that when we talk about creating questions kind of in a little bit, but that add question option is available there. Once I've ordered and chosen my questions, I can click save. Let's actually say I'm going to remove 2 and I'll go down to maybe 8 questions. And that way you'll see that those changes were saved. And so now you can see that the 8 questions I handpicked are saved here for this quiz. So I want to make sure that I'm not then changing this number because it would pick a new batch of 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever that looks like. This is the first concept within here. I could also add a concept. So this is one of the advantages for customizing practice is that if I want students to do like a unit review with multiple concepts, I could put them all into the same quiz. So I could add a question set and I can expand and browse through my question types. So I could go to Earth Science and I could start pulling topics. So Introduction to Earth Science, expand that and work my way through. But you'll see it might take a little bit of time to get what you're looking for. So I could also click in here and just search for other topics on water. So let's say we have 10 biology topics on water. We have erosion by groundwater for Earth Science. We have states of water for Earth Science. So I can pick any of these concepts and it will pull those questions in there. And so once again, it defaults to about 20. I can add up to 100 questions max. So you want to make sure that if you only want a couple from each thing and you have more than 10 topics, that you decrease the number for each section before you get past 100 because the quiz will max out at 100 questions. But now I have kind of 2 topics, concepts included in here. I can do the same thing. I can change this number so that there's only a few in here. It will warn me again, or I could go in using the pencil edit option to edit those questions. I could also reorder the concepts by choosing, just hovering over the 1 or the 2, which is the order, and dragging them to swap the order. So that allows me to change the order of which concept comes first in that quiz. Or I could say, actually, I didn't want states of water in here, so I am going to remove that section, and we're just going to go back to the water cycle. So all of those are options in terms of picking your questions, adding other concepts within here, setting some of the filter choices for quizzes. And so when I save this quiz, I'm going to update this. I saved my questions within the concept, and then if I could preview it, or I could go back to the practice page and kind of jump back to where I was before I created this quiz. And I think I just hit something else. So we're going here, and so you'll see, oh, it looks like I now need to hit back because it was just taking me back to the quiz and then back to my library. So I'm going to jump to the library so you can see where to find this. So if I've saved my work, you'll see all of the work that you've customized is available as a demo, or sorry, in your library. In this case, the demo, or the last thing I just did, shows up at the top. And so I can find that content here. I could also, because this was on Earth Science, if I happen to be browsing that topic, I might see that quiz within that concept page, but that would only be for me because I created that. So if I pulled up the water cycle again, and I went to that concept, I would be able to see any assessments that I had created as well. under that community contributed content. But in this case, we're not necessarily seeing kind of, this is the one I just created. So it's still tied to that concept, but there's no way to publish the quiz in the same way. So really your best option for accessing anything that you've made is by accessing it through your library and opening it that way. So I think with that, maybe we'll pause for a minute and see what questions have come up before we move into creating questions.
Sure. Just a quick reminder to everybody who's in the chat window there's so many great comments and suggestions being posted there, but a lot of them are just coming in for panelists. So feel free to repost if you realize that you just sent yours to panelists. Change the option to say all panelists and attendees so everybody can see them. Otherwise, they're just coming to CK-12. And again, we're more interested in the Q&A window for a set of live questions. Katie is currently on the screen that we're going to start with here for the first question, which is how do you get to quizzes? How do you start the process? So she is on the screen in her library, and she's going to press that create new button, and she can go down to quiz. She showed you several different ways to do this because you can do it from adaptive practice by customizing, but if you're just wanting to start the process of a quiz, you can start here. The next most popular question, Katie, was about this idea of serving different questions up to different students. And several questions, like for instance, Emily wants to know, do all students get the same set of 20 questions if you customize the existing adaptive practice? Can we, and then Jonathan asked, can we create a quiz where different students get different questions? So why don't you talk again about what the shuffle does and doesn't do in selecting questions?
Yeah, so if you really want your students to get different questions, we recommend that you use our adaptive practice component right now. That allows students to get questions based on their success level. It will adjust from easy to medium to hard based on how they're doing. And there was a question about like Bloom's taxonomy or depth of knowledge in the queue. That level is based on, it's kind of auto-adjusted based on how students are answering them. So if a lot of students are struggling with that question versus students who are getting it more easily, it's based on that piece. It's not based on kind of the higher order thinking skills. It's based on like the difficulty level. Because some topics are like long division of polynomials. It's a procedural concept more than something else. So the questions within there would be leveled based on the original intent from the author and then the students, kind of how students have done in the past on those questions. But that adaptive practice is really where you would be differentiating automatically within our system. For a quiz right now, as I said, it's currently a binary choice. We're looking into options that kind of are somewhere in between that like super fixed quiz-like environment and our adaptive practice environment if you really want a custom assignment or a custom homework. But for now, when you work with a quiz, all students will see the same questions. So the only way to kind of adjust that component is that shuffle question option where they would get them in a different order. But if you really wanted students to get different questions, then you would need to give them different quizzes.
Okay, Katie, I'm going to let you add a question set back in there to that quiz. We have several people asking about our labels of easy, medium, and hard. And I think some things relating to filters and how you can see those at a glance. So she's just going to pull up a concept here. Somebody asked what a concept is. We talk about a concept as just like a bite-sized piece of learning, just a unit of learning. So the Pythagorean theorem applications, that's what we're calling a concept on CK-12. You can see that we have labeled questions easy, medium, and hard. This is done by the CK-12 team and by subject matter experts of looking at, kind of common sense, what level of question we think it should be. And then we also have data from our intelligence system that helps us realize if somebody's missing the question a lot, it might be harder. If a lot of people are answering it easier. So there's a bit of an algorithm and a bit of a human component to the difficulty level of questions. But Katie is able to sort and shuffle if she just wanted to see, let's just look at the easy questions. She could sort by difficulty level at the top. Or if she wanted to not select the true-false questions, she could sort by type and she could just not select those. So you do have some filtering options there. Let's see. Q&A is popular right now, which we love. Star's typing as quickly as she can to answer some of these questions. I think a lot of questions are about how can you edit CK-12 questions, which is going to be a section Katie's getting to talk about, your ability to create questions and question types and answer that. So should we move on to that next section, Katie? I'm going to take back the screen, and I do want you all to keep populating the Q&A, and then remember in the chat window, all panelists and attendees. Okay, we're going to go back to the keynote here for just a second. And we're going to talk about creating questions for quizzes.
So I have shown you how to create quizzes, so starting from scratch, or kind of how you would be able to customize practice. But if you actually wanted to click that add your own question, and so we get a really a lot of questions saying, hey, I like CK-12's question, but I just want to change it. Right now there's not a way to kind of make your own, like customize your own question from a CK-12 question. You do need to create your own from scratch. So just keep that in mind. You can use our questions or you can build your own. There's not a I want yours, but I want to tweak it choice. So when you go in, there are a number of different question types that you as a user have. There are a couple internally that we're working with. One of those is an open response. That's not currently an option for you. As you've noticed, we're sorting out all the kinks on that piece right now in the summer. But you have your standard multiple choice, select all that apply, true, false question types, short answer and fill in the blank choices. Drag and drop is like a sort into category option. Highlighting, I almost think of as like a circle the right answer choice. And then discussion questions are really meant to like prompt a class discussion. There's no correct or incorrect answer for them. So I'm going to talk about the steps to customize within there, and then we'll show you some of those specific pieces. So the first thing you need to do is you need to pick your question type. Once you've saved a question, that's the only thing that you can't change. And the answer choice options are based on the type of question. So definitely start by deciding what type of question you're working with, then write your question prompt, add in any answers or distractors. So like if it's multiple choice, the right answer and the ones that are wrong. You can add in hints if you'd like. You can actually add in feedback, which I definitely recommend when we talk about inline questions. You can select the difficulty level that you think this question is, and as Lindsay said, based on student responses over time, our system will kind of adjust what that looks like for our questions and give you kind of an idea of whether or not that's actually the difficulty level you thought it was. And then you can add in question details. So you have to pick the concept that it goes to if you're not already customizing a concept and it's pre-filled for you. And then we'll talk about using variables a little bit for some fun math equations. If you are creating math options, if you joined us for our advanced Flexbook session, we talked about the math editor. That math editor is also available within here, so you can make fun math formatted text. And let's go into a couple question types. So our first question type is a multiple choice. So notice here, it would look like what it is on the right, but on the left, I would have to build both the question prompt and then the answer choices. And I can choose to randomize or not if I want those answer choices to change each time the question gets served up. But that's pretty standard. Our sample highlight, I have to like choose whole parts of stuff. So you'll see in this case, I picked both W and H as the letters that come together to spell the sound in the word whole. And you highlight per word, so you would need to space out letters if you were creating something like that. The student who correctly selected both letters got full credit for that. The student who selected one of those did not get credit for that question. Right now our questions work as you got it right or wrong, but it shows you that you got that part of it right to help them learn. In terms of credit, that wouldn't count towards their one correct of their 10 goal. The next question type would be drag and drop. So this is a little bit complicated building wise because I have to pick my categories and highlight and drag them all in. But then when I get to the question, students get these blocks that they can drag into the appropriate section based on, in this case, whether or not 2 units of measurement are equal or not equal. From the next one, we would go from here to, I'm going to let Lindsay just talk a couple of points about creating questions, and then I'll go into a live demo.
Yeah, here's a few frequently asked questions that we get. One is, where do questions that I create live? And questions you create live on the back end of our site. You can access and edit your questions through the quiz editor by adding the concept to which they are tagged. Can everyone see the questions that I create? No. Questions you create are not automatically published to CK-12 Question Bank. So if you share a link to a quiz you created that includes your own questions, then others would be able to see those questions. But otherwise, it's not anything on our system that gets automatically published. It's for you and your account and your concepts. Can I share my questions with others? So we're working on this. You can share quizzes currently via the matching URL with others. These quizzes would include any original questions. So you would just grab the URL and share it as you would other resources. Hopefully at some point we'll have some better solutions for you guys who want to collaborate on quizzes. How can I create questions for concepts not available on CK-12? If any of you guys are interested in creating your own book, or you're not using math and science questions in your courses, I'd encourage you to attend tomorrow's community contributed content and non-STEM materials on CK-12, because I'm going to be talking to you a lot about how to create a book from scratch, how to create questions that aren't related to math and science, where do you tag them. The short answer, the very short answer is that you can do this through the quiz editor. You can create a new quiz from your library by clicking add question set and then create new questions. And then when you select a concept, you're going to pick something from your library, some resource that's probably not math or science, and you're going to tag your questions to that. And again, we'll be walking you through that in the community contributed and non-STEM session.
Thanks, Lindsay. So I'm going to steal this back from you. We're going to go into the question editor. So once again, if I wanted to create a new quiz from here, I would start from here. I would create a new quiz, and then I could pick from there what I wanted to happen. One note about kind of what I'm adding into here: stuff isn't automatically published, but it still falls under our license. We can pull those questions if we found like some good ones, and you also want to make sure that because you're sharing those within our license to other users and students, and they could share that forward, that you're not pulling questions from licensed question banks that you have. They do need to be your own questions if you are writing them yourself. But so let's say I want to build my own question set, and I'm going to create new questions. This is going to bump me into my question editor. So as I said, the first thing is to pick your type of question. So multiple choice is starting place. We're good to go. That's pretty straightforward. If I scroll down here, I would see my answer choices and distractor. I'd see my hints choice, easy, medium, and hard, concepts, and standard. So all of these are pieces that I can include. And then within particular pieces, I can include kind of feedback for incorrect answers or things like that. So let's pick an example, let's say short answer option. So if I was going to write a question, let's say when water vapor is converted from a gas to a liquid, which part of the water cycle is this? So I'm going to put the answer is condensation down here. I'd want to spell it correctly. Please note that our system, it's correct or incorrect. We do not currently account for misspelled words. So if you have a common misspelling that your kids always use, you may want to use that as an alternate answer and count something like that as well. This is super helpful for, let's say, like 1/2 or 0.5. If I need both of those to be correct answers, I'd say 1/2 is an alternate answer, 0.5 is an not 0.05. 0.5 is an alternate answer. So when I have equivalent answers that would both be valid, definitely choose that add alternate correct answer choice, or I can simply remove them here. Ignore spaces in answers. If I was writing something math-based, let's say like x plus 2, I would want to make sure to ignore that because x plus 2 and x space plus space 2 would still be equivalent answers. But let's say I was doing something spelling or English based where spaces mattered, then I would want to deselect that, and the answer choice would only choose very specifically, I need it spaced out this way. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about kind of what those options are. As I said, your type of question is fixed once you go through this, but until I'm done doing that, I could actually keep changing this piece. So I'm going to actually swap this to a fill-in-the-blank question type. Notice it removed all my answer choices because it's a little bit different. So let's say I wanted to create a polynomial. So write a third-degree polynomial with roots 2, -1, and 3. Okay, so when I do this, that is a little bit more complicated. The short answer isn't really a good choice because I have y and I have powers and root, like all these different pieces. So I might actually just want to say, okay, I'm going to write this out. Y equals x to the third minus 4x squared plus x plus 6. And I could choose to use like a squared here and highlight it and superscript it so that it's a little cleaner from here. And maybe the same for the 3. So I can change things a bit without using kind of our math editor. Any open response can't include math formatted text. So like right here, I can put all of this fun formatting and images in an open response answer. Or in this case, when I add stuff in, it has to be text the students can type on a keyboard. So here I might say, I'm going to actually highlight all of the coefficients. So I need -4 to be an answer. I need +1 to be an answer. I need 6 to be an answer. Kind of what does this look like and how does that work? And you'll see 1, -4, 1, and 6 are the answer choices that I have in here. I could choose to ignore spaces. It's not really going to make a difference. But this way, they're going to fill in, instead of one answer at the end, they're going to fill in those pieces. So in order to save this, I do have to add a concept. So if I just click submit, it's going to say you have to do that piece. So I'm going to do polynomials. It gives me all these options for polynomials kind of within here. I probably just want my standard polynomial algebra. Lindsay referenced the search in my library piece if I wanted to tag it to my own stuff, but tagging it to CK-12 polynomials. And I could add grades or standards or even kind of other tagging for different pieces. But I'm going to submit that so you can see what it looks like. And here you'll see that there's all these pieces. So if the student had actually done this out, this would be 1, that would be -4. Let's say they accidentally put 0 here and then 6. And I'm going to check that. So they got most of that right, but not all the rest of it. So I could copy this. I could make a new one. So I'm going to make a new question just so we can jump right in there. We're going to go through a couple more question types. And let's say I wanted to do, as we said, highlighting. That works the same way, where a word that I'd want to highlight. So let's say an astronaut, and I wanted to make this the word that they're highlighting. I would simply choose it and add that as an answer. So the same way you would do for that fill in the blank to choose your answer choices. Drag and drop's a little funky, so let's maybe do that as my other big choice from here. And as I do that, I could say sort the following based on whether or not they are metals. And I have so many typos in here, but we'll kind of move on from there. And then the same deal. I would write my answer choices. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, nickel, iron, whatever that looks like, and you can kind of go through. And then you'd choose this. You'd click Add Answer, iron, Add Answer, and then you'd add your categories. So let's say metals is my first category, and I would put those 2 in there. And if you wanted to maybe mix the order up, that would go from there. And then I could say non-metals. And let's just choose one more of those for here and add that answer and whatever those look like. So I could go through, and the ones that I wanted to do, if I wanted to add a hint, just note that that option is here. It pops up a window. I could add a hint. So, you know, try looking at the periodic table, and I could add that in.
While you're on the screen, Katie, show real quick. Somebody asked for you to show again if they've built their own question and it's not related to a concept CK-12 offers, what are they doing for that concept?
So here I picked polynomials, which is no longer really relevant. So maybe I would do something here and I'd search in my library and I'd say, well, I'm going to tag it to CP Advanced Editing, which makes no sense at all for this topic, but I could pick a topic from within CK-12 or from within my library. And once I have options, I think this one's fixed because it's coming from the polynomial piece, and it's kind of in that bucket. But if you created a brand new question outside of that, then you could pick whatever concept you wanted there. So you would just choose the search within library or search within CK-12, and that would allow you to swap between those. So if I submit this, I'm going to show you what this looks like. I can preview my question, and we'll see, note that, you know, oxygen goes there, so on. So when I'm done with this, and I update this, I should see my question at the bottom of the selected questions. So here we had polynomials, we had 20, we added a couple more.
Yeah, the screen that you're on right now actually relates to one of our user questions that says, I can't find the entire list of questions in a specific adaptive practice set. I create a quiz, I see that it says 10 out of 100, but I can't see all of the questions. And so explain the difference between how many questions we're actually serving up versus what that 100 number is.
Yeah, so in this case, it looks like there are 23 questions specific to polynomials. That could be a combination of the questions CK-12 wrote and any that I just made up on the spot. To see all of them, I would click this edit icon right here, and then it would bring me to the whole list of questions. And so notice that this particular one has a little pencil edit icon. Because I work at CK-12, I still have CK-12, but you would see your name listed for any that you created as the author, and that's the one I can edit. The rest of these ones that are in here, I can't edit because they're CK-12 like question bank questions, but this shows you kind of what they are and where they go. If I'm adding more questions, you would find your question kind of at the bottom of this row. So these are the questions that have been selected. Notice this is the last question I just made. It's a sort the following based. It has nothing to do with polynomials, but you'd find those questions kind of at that particular piece.
Can we show our users where this quiz lives and how to print?
Sure. So if I save this quiz, I'm going to save the questions here. I'm going to call this my polynomial demo, just so that we have a title for this, polynomial demo. And then I update that. It's going to save that new title. And note it says back to library because that's where I started from. So that's great. So I'm going to jump back to my library and you'll see that it's there. I can access it directly from my library. And when I click on polynomial here, you'll see I have some options. I can create new questions to go in this particular quiz, just like I could when I was on the practice page for that particular topic. And if I expand this, I have a couple of options. I have download PDF, download HTML. In general, most of the time, if people just need a worksheet, they would be using that download PDF option. And then I'll talk about embedding as inline kind of in the last part of this webinar.
Okay, before we move on to the next section, now's a good time to show you just a quick video of a teacher we met with in El Paso School District in Texas. And I like this one because he talks about how he uses both practice and quizzes in his classroom. So let me show you this quick video.
So the practice, and especially now with some of the updates, has become more adaptive to where the students are working on different questions. The more questions they get right, they seem to get more challenging. You know, I've noticed as I go around help kids, question number 5 for one student is not question number 5 for another student. And as a teacher, it benefits me because it challenges the students to their level. I think I had a student earlier talk about how it's kind of adjusted to her and it kind of keeps her engaged. And then also, too, it helps me kind of see where these students are at. And then the quizzes I attach to the practices that come from that question bank, those tend to use the same questions for every student. But then again, at the same time, the real-time feedback is something I like, too. So the kids, they take the test, they know immediately what their grade is. They don't have to wait for me to grade a paper, grade an assignment, and then on top of that, they can go back and review and see, okay, I'm missing these types of questions, or I'm doing well in the medium type of questions, but I'm missing the hard questions. And so if they choose to, they can even go back to the practice and kind of work their way back to some of those harder questions.
All right, so he just set us up to talk about how to use quizzes and to see student work through reports. And we'll talk about our newest feature, the inline questions, a little bit too.
So as I referenced, kind of there was that little bit on the side for an embed code. Inline questions are a way to use a quiz within a lesson. And so you'll see in our newest middle school math books as they continue to roll out that there are these little kind of windows with, in this case, there are 8 questions in that quiz, and they get popped up. We highly recommend that you put feedback in because they're really a learning tool, and students can complete that question as many times as needed to get it right because they're trying to learn at that point. They're not being assessed on whether or not they know it when it's built into the lesson that way. It also doesn't report a score because you're not assigning it as a quiz. You're really incorporating it into the learning component from there. As I said, you can see that embed code on the left side, just like I had in that particular piece. This is a great option. A lot of the ones you'll see in middle school math are actually based on right underneath some sort of interactive piece. So if you are embedding a GeoGebra interactive or a kind of Plix window from one of our Plix basic options, then that would be a great way to write some questions that go with that, or just put your own questions in to follow up from a video or text as you work your way through. And you can copy the embed code from there. And so when you click on that, you get the embed code. And then the other option is to kind of swap quizzes out in your Flexbook. So I could assign, kind of replace that practice in the bottom right corner, switch it to a quiz. It may pop up a window that just kind of forces you to copy that section into your library if you haven't made other edits on it. And then you can pick your quiz. So you'll see kind of all the quizzes that you've made already, or you can create a new quiz to add within that particular piece.
Okay, so if you were in our Getting Started with Adaptive Practice and Assignments webinar, we talked about how to quick assign 2.0 lessons as well as practice and other modalities to your CK-12 or Google Class. And you can do the same thing for Flexbook 2.0 lessons that now have a quiz instead of a practice attached to them. Our original reads, whether the standalone or in a 1.0 Flexbook, are assigned separately from any practice or quiz modality. Like that. There's another place where you find the assign. And another. If you're using Canvas or Schoology, you can assign any quizzes you have created along with other modalities such as interactives or reads to your class in those systems. The ability to assign Flexbook 2.0 lessons with attached practice or quizzes will be coming this summer to both Canvas and Schoology. There is one other option from within CK-12 classes. This allows you to create an assignment for practice, quizzes, or a combination of those, but that does not include Flexbook 2.0 lessons or other modalities, so we generally recommend that you assign from each modality or lesson page.
And then reports, kind of just a couple of pieces from there. These are currently in CK-12 classes. They're coming soon for Google Classroom, Canvas, and Schoology, and they include this heat map that gives a little bit of information for each type of assignment. So you can see the check marks on the left for the general learning modalities, which give you 0 or full credit within an LMS, or a check mark or not. And I want to compare the assignments for practice or quizzes. So this particular example, as we briefly referenced, was created from within the class, so I could combine practice and quiz together. But all quick assign modalities would have their own title heading. So you can see that the different modalities are split within the reports, and each part is based on the type of assignment. So in this particular student at the 100%, you have, that's the goal of 10 correct. The next practice has, even though it's a practice with a goal of 10 correct, they've only gotten 2 out of those 10 correct before they submitted it. And then the last one, the quiz, is actually based on a true percentage point. So just keep that in mind as you work your way. If I clicked on those percentages, it would pop up more details on the student's work, and I'll show you that live in a second. And then the other piece that we just launched like a week ago was our Insights in Flexbooks 2.0. So if it was attached to a 2.0 lesson, it would tell you that within that lesson, if you're kind of browsing through your book, it'll tell you the time students spent on that lesson, as well as the percent correct for the quiz score, and even the ratio of correct versus incorrect or versus total answers. So you get kind of all of those pieces as you work your way through. So let me swap over. I'm going to steal the screen and show you kind of briefly how this works out. So let me go into a class from here. So we have our nice CEP class, and we have a summer 2019 class that we populated with some cool stuff. So if I go into my assignment section, I can open, let's say, my latest Flexbook 2.0 lesson with a quiz attached. And if I go into the assignment, I can actually open the lesson within that book. So that's a quick way to get into your Flexbook, is through the assignment option. And here, if I choose to click on this little grid right here, I can see the insights on this particular piece. So I'm going to pick the class that has actually done this assignment. And then let's say Matthew C. So up at the top here, you'll see this person spent 1 minute and 41 seconds, and he actually got 100%. So maybe this was a review for him. We're good to go. Someone else might have only spent a little bit of time. Anything gray hasn't actually done that work yet. But so you can see these different kind of just general quick assignment for the class as a whole, and that's insight level. But if I go back into the actual class itself and I click on reports, I can see more details there. I can see multiple attempts for a particular quiz. So let's say I picked this person up. I could see the time spent, the actual answer choices here. If I went into the more details piece right now, I would see if they had done this once or twice. In this case, it looks like she has 1 attempt. We are trying to pull those attempts into the pop-up view as well, but right now you can kind of click in to get more details as you go through. And then you also might find it helpful to download that CSV, and that option is at the top there. So that's kind of if it's swapped out for practice. Let's go back into this physical properties and matter book. I'm going to actually go to this book as a whole. I'm going to go to maybe the lesson right after that on density. And if I click start right here, I could swap that practice out with a quiz. So if I switch this to a quiz, it says I'm currently viewing an older version. So let's go to the newest version before I start making changes. And I'm going to switch this to a quiz. And once again, it's going to have me save this section in my library. And then I could pull a particular quiz up from within this piece. So I could, once I've saved it, open that, and then choose any quiz I want. So pulley quiz, element quiz, whatever I wanted from within here, or I could create a new quiz on this particular topic. So that's an option to kind of assign that, swap it out. And then if I chose this assign button at the top, I would be assigning the lesson with the matching quiz, and that's what would happen. If I was editing this book, I could go through, and for those of you guys that were in an advanced editing piece, you might have seen this a little bit as well. I could actually go into that particular section, and if I swapped it under the related modalities piece, then it would swap that quiz out as well. So there are options to include that content by pulling it up in related modalities, and I can, as you can see here, I can pull from any of my quizzes to swap that out, or I can do it directly from the saved piece. This is also where I could, if I chose to embed anything, so let me click into this for a second, and I chose to embed this option, that would be where my embedded questions would show up as inline, and that changes that from like that actual component to a like where you're assigning a quiz to just practice for students within that particular piece. So I'm going to jump back to my library for a second. If I want to get a score on this quiz, I need to actually attach it to the Flexbook, either through the related modalities piece or through that quick option. Or I can assign that quiz directly. Let's say I want them to read the lesson and do the practice, and then I want an assessment for them. So I would go to my library, I would get this piece, and then I would click this assign to class option. And this would give me that separate quiz score from that particular lesson. It's also where, as I said, I can expand this and I can pull this embed code, and then I would just paste this into my lesson to get that particular piece. So I know there's kind of a lot of moving parts, but generally I would say your options are to start by customizing practice and using CK-12's questions to start with, or go to your library and create a new question bank or a new quiz to start with your own questions in it. And then choose if you want to assign this quiz separately, or you want to attach it to a Flexbook 2.0 lesson as kind of the practice or quiz that goes with that, or you want to pull an embed code and actually bring it directly into text. And you can see kind of what that might look like. Let me pull up one of our new 8th grade book, just so you get an idea of what those questions look like if they were in line. So
was going to say, I guess that was one of the more common questions that just came into Q&A of people trying to, I think, wrap their head around what the difference is with an inline questions and what it looks like. So now that Katie's on the page, why don't you talk them through that?
Yeah, so in this case, our team that created this Math 8 book, they actually built a quick little quiz with 5 questions in it. There are hints included because they added hints. But really what they did was they put these pieces in here. They actually added feedback when you, underneath your answer choices, there's an option to include feedback. I missed that. I can share that after if people have questions. But in general, just kind of explore that piece. But they would go through, they'd click next. Let's say I got one wrong instead of guessing. So here, this is question number 3. I'm going to try it again. So it's really, the goal is to have them learn what this is. I'm still getting it wrong. Oops, not the right answer. So if this question doesn't have a ton of feedback directly in it, but you might recommend kind of putting some of the feedback if you're designing your own questions to help students learn.
So several people in Q&A are saying, like, basically, whoa, this looks complicated. This looks like a lot of information. Do you have more resources on this? And for you guys who are just beginning with CK-12, which is what the Certified Educator Program is all about, you know, this is going to seem overwhelming. It is a lot. It's a lot of information. We don't expect you to be able to do all of this, and you're not necessarily going to want to use every single one of these tools that we just showcased today in your own situations in your own classroom. So I think Katie's just showing you the capabilities of our system, and once you figure out that you want to dive in and you want to create a quiz or you want to work on inline questions, we do have a very comprehensive help desk that will have a lot of help desk articles for you. You have this video that's going to be available that, you know, you're not going to want to watch the whole thing over again, but surely you can kind of scroll through to the section that might be relevant for you. We have the resource page that you're welcome to print out that's going to have a little bit of a cheat sheet on some of this information. And then you have, again, us, a support team, jumpstart at CK12.org. So please don't get discouraged of thinking that this looks like a lot. These are advanced skills. We have users who've used us for a very, very, very long time who've never created a quiz because they've just used our adaptive practice as is and our Flexbooks as is. So just take it all in, breathe, explore, reach out when you have questions. I guess those are my encouraging tips for that. As you guys are continuing to populate the Q&A, we are reaching kind of that hour mark. So I need to tell you a few additional things, and then Katie's going to stay on here and demo anything else that would be helpful for you guys as you're wrapping your head around quizzes and inline questions and everything that you just saw today. So kind of in summary, again, we're always so appreciative of you guys taking your time to learn with us. And this is a good resource, the CK-12 Custom AP 2019 handout. That could be a resource page that gets you started. This is linked in the Flexbook with your assignments and with the YouTube link. It's all together in that master CEP book for you. We have some more sessions coming up that if you jumped into this session before taking the Getting Started one, we do want you to participate in that Getting Started one, either live if you need it for one of your live sessions, or you can always watch the recording of that session. But if you jumped into this one first, yeah, you might have a few missing pieces that could be filled in by watching that session. Also, for all of you who have questions about Google Classroom and Canvas and Schoology, since that doesn't apply to everybody, we're just doing these little LMS breakout sessions that you can join us for 30 minutes and ask your questions about our integration with those platforms. For those learning management systems, if you can't join us live, again, view one of those recordings. Those sessions don't count towards your live requirements for certification, but it's great information if you are a Google Classroom, Canvas, or Schoology user. Case study sessions. We actually just had the first one right before this webinar, and it was a success. We had a good time, and there were great questions. We did it on providing professional development, so you can see that recording if you missed it and are curious about how you might get professional development going in your district. But we have these 4 other case study sessions. We're bringing in panelists, special guests, opening the mic up for you guys to ask questions live. We are only running these one time each, and so you can check our main program page at ck12.org/certified to register for any of these if you'd like to participate, or like I said, you can watch the recording. Your session assignment, if you want credit for the session, we match your Zoom attendance with your assignment. So you will navigate to the Customizing CK-12 Adaptive Practice section and review all of the questions. And then once you're ready to go, you will take our quiz. And you now have a better understanding for how these quizzes were built, because Katie was showing you what it's like to create questions on CK-12. Also, feedback form. We love your feedback, so please, it's in the book or the tinyurl.com, CK-12 Feedback 2019. At any time for any session, give us comments, what's going well, what's not going well. We review every single comment, and we appreciate it. Also, there are opportunities to partner with us. As you think about making customizing practice and including practice, quizzes, making Flexbook lessons a part of your curriculum, we invite you to partner with us to help see how you're using CK-12 and how it is supporting learning and student growth. So if you're interested in kind of upping your game, you don't need our permission to use CK-12, but if you're wanting to become more of a partner with us, being a pilot school, trying these things out, sharing information, email us at jumpstart at ck12.org just to make sure that you're on our radar and we're supporting you. Okay, so again, we're at the hour mark. If you need to go, you are welcome to go. If you need to tweet, please tweet, hashtag CK12 certified. And now we're gonna get back to that Q&A window and start answering your questions.
So Lindsay, we have a couple of questions about languages. Our Google Translate option is built in for our lessons. It's not built in for our questions right now. Part of that is because that's not a perfect translate. And so the difference between a slightly off and on translation and in a specific question would actually make or break whether or not that question is correct, and the answer choices aren't going to necessarily change into that language as well. So currently the language choices are available for our lessons, but not for our questions. So just keep that in mind. You're welcome to write questions in whatever language you choose. I've stumbled on the back end and found questions in Portuguese and a whole bunch of other random languages that teachers have written themselves. So feel free to do that yourself. Let me swap over and steal the screen back so I can walk you through a couple pieces. We have questions about, I've been adding reads from various Flexbooks into my Flexbook, but I don't see any inline questions. To my knowledge, right now, you're gonna see inline questions in our newest middle school math books as we load them out. You are not required to add inline questions to your reads. This is just a bonus option. Once again, our getting started sessions are the ones that have kind of the things you need to know to understand how our system works and make assignments and see progress. Our advanced Flexbook editing, this customizing practice, are all added bonus options you have if you want to go from there. But not all of our content, actually the majority of our content does not currently have inline questions. So if you want them in there right now, you would need to create them. As we continue to update our books and add more interactivity, you'll see them in more places. But we had kind of, how is this assigned? How does it look in reports? What does that go? We have a couple pieces there. So if you take a quiz and you embed it within a lesson, you are not getting a report on it. You are saying, I want my student to explore these questions while they are learning. It is not an assessment. It does not send a report back. Right now, if I assign this lesson right at the top here, so if I click assign and it popped up, I could assign to CK-12 or my Google class, that would assign this lesson and the matching practice. If I swapped out that practice, so if I clicked this, I don't even think this book is mine right now. So right now my only option is to preview. But if I was in a book that I owned, so let's go back there just for a second. So I'm going to go to CK-12. I'm going to go to my library where I can find anything I have customized. It's super helpful. And the most recent thing I customized was my physical science Flexbook option. So if I choose this and I have gone into matter and change, and note here, I have already swapped this out with a quiz. So right here, I could click this, I could switch to a different practice. So if you make your own book and the practice doesn't match, you can swap your practice to another concept, or you can change this to a different quiz. If I assign this section, it would assign the lesson and the matching quiz. that would give me a report on the practice or the quiz, but anything inline does not create a report. If I wanted to create a brand new quiz, once again, I would go, as I said, to my library where I find anything helpful for CK-12 that I have customized. Let's say I wanted to find something in my library, so I knew that I made a polynomials quiz. And in our search feature, you can see CK-12 content, community contributed content, and that search bar lets you search your library as well. So we have a polynomials concept. I want any quizzes I made, and it looks like I made some stuff. Maybe the untitled one had some polynomial stuff in it as we go through here. So you'll see some options in there. And you can search that way, or you can go straight into your library. And, oh, it didn't say polynomials. That's where I was getting the difference. So polynomial demo, I could pull that up. From there, I could edit this, or I could create a brand new one. And either creating a new one for my library or editing it bumps me into this quiz module. And that allows me to choose my questions. It allows me to add my own question new set. If I had a new question set, I could create my questions from scratch. All sorts of options. And then it looks like we maybe have one last question here about how it looks in reports. Our reports, as I said, this Flexbook 2.0 lesson had a quiz attached. It gives you your quiz score. This Flexbook 2.0 lesson had practice attached. It gave me my practice score. It does not report inline questions. So if you want a score, please make sure you assign that separately as an individual quiz or as an attached quiz, but not as inline. Okay, we have one question right here. It says, I love the heat map of reporting. Can I switch them into using CK-12 through Schoology later in the year, even if I log them into CK-12 to access their assignments at the beginning? We highly, highly recommend that you pick one or the other. It gets very complicated for students when they try to turn in work across systems. I do not recommend making a CK-12 class and then assigning them in Schoology. If your system is using Schoology, then I recommend that you do all of their assignment. If you did need to swap them from one to the other, I would probably do it a clean semester break so that everything before that is in CK-12 and then everything after that is in Schoology. These reports will be available in Schoology by the end of the summer, so that's not an issue. If you're looking for this report, that won't stop you from accessing that piece. So it looks like we have answered all these questions. If you have others, I know this is a complicated concept. Check out the CEP Flexbook resource pages, information, or email us, and we'll go from there. Have a good day.